The first thing they took from me wasn't my company. It was my name. For 41 years, I was Calvin Mercer, the man who built Mercer Building and Supply out of a single dusty lot off Wilkinson Boulevard in Charlotte. Then one Tuesday morning, a judge I'd never met signed a piece of paper. And just like that, I became a ward. A protected person. That's the language they use. Protected. As if the locked door at Cedar Hollow Memory Care was there to keep the world from hurting me and not the other way around. Before I tell you how a man worth $60 million ended up sleeping in a vinyl bed under a ceiling tile with a brown water stain shaped like Florida, let me ask you something. Wherever you're watching this from, drop it in the comments. I mean it. Tell me your town, your country, the chair you're sitting in. An old man who spent 19 months being told he didn't exist anymore likes to know there are real people out there listening. Because for a long time, I wasn't sure anybody was. Cedar Hollow smelled like bleach and boiled vegetables, and something underneath both of those that I came to understand was just the smell of being forgotten. My room was on the 3rd floor, the memory care wing, behind a door that needed a 4-digit code to open from the inside. I didn't have dementia. I want to be clear about that because it's the whole rotten center of this thing. My mind was sharp as a framing nail. I could still tell you the wholesale price of a sheet of 3/4-inch plywood in 1987. But once you got a doctor's signature saying a man is non compos mentis, nobody listens to the man. They listen to the signature. I marked the days the way prisoners do because that's what I was. A small notebook the night nurse Eli smuggled in for me. He was the only one in that building who looked me in the eye like I was a person. Day 300, day 400. Some nights I'd lie there and listen to the air handler kick on and off, and I'd run the numbers in my head the way I used to when I couldn't sleep. Payroll, receivables, the loan on the Gastonia warehouse, except now the only thing left to count was the days. The man who put me there was my son, Wesley, my boy. I taught him to drive a forklift when he was 14. I taught him to read a P&L when he was 20. I had a plan, you understand, the kind every father with a business has. He'd take over slow, prove himself, and one day I'd hand him the keys and go fishing on Lake Norman like a man's supposed to. I wanted that. God help me. I wanted to give him everything. What I didn't see, what a father never wants to see, was that Wesley didn't want to be given it. He wanted to take it. There's a difference. And the difference is the whole story. It started with his wife, Bianca. I should have trusted my gut about her. My late wife, Diane, gone 4 years now, and thank God she didn't live to see this. Diane never warmed to her. She watches your hands when you sign things, Cal, Diane told me once. Not your face, your hands. I laughed it off. I was a man who laughed things off. That was my weakness, and Bianca found it the way water finds a crack in a foundation. Here's how they did it, and I want you to hear every piece of it, because if it happened to me, it can happen to your father, your mother, you. It was a slow burn. First, it was little things. Bianca started showing up at family dinners with a worried look, asking had I felt confused lately. Wesley started repeating my own jokes back to me as if I'd forgotten telling them, then exchanging a glance with her like, see? Then came the appointment they made for me with a doctor. Helena Voss. Just a wellness check, Dad, you're 70, it's responsible. And I went, because what fool doesn't trust his own son? Dr. Voss asked me to draw a clock. I drew a clock. She asked me to remember 3 words. I remembered them, and then in her report she wrote that I'd shown significant impairment, agitation, and signs of paranoid ideation regarding family members. That last part is what gets me, the paranoia. They wrote down that I didn't trust my family, and they used my distrust as proof I was sick. It's a perfect trap. The more you fight it, the crazier you look. I found out later, Wesley paid Voss $40,000 routed through a wellness clinic she had a stake in. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The day they came for me, I was in my own kitchen making coffee. 2 men in scrubs, a woman with a clipboard, and a sheriff's deputy who wouldn't meet my eyes. Wesley stood in the doorway in a quarter-zip pullover, hands in his pockets, and he said, "Dad, this is for your own good. You're not safe alone anymore." And Bianca stood behind him crying. And the worst part, the part I still can't shake, is that I believed for 1 second she might be crying for me. I yelled. Of course I yelled. Wouldn't you? And every word out of my mouth went into somebody's notes as combative. When a sane man is dragged out of his house, he does not go quietly, and they know that, and they count on it. The conservatorship hearing took 11 minutes. I watched it from a video screen because they said I was too unstable to attend in person. 11 minutes for a man to lose his entire life. Wesley was appointed conservator of my person and my estate. Conservator. He got control of all of it. The company, the accounts, the house on Providence Road that Diane and I picked the wallpaper for. He even got to decide what television I was allowed to watch, and then the visits started. Once a month, Wesley and Bianca would come to Cedar Hollow, sit in the family lounge with its fake fireplace, and perform for the staff. They brought flowers. They held my hand. "We love you, Dad. We just want you to get better." And every single visit, the same time, they'd slide a document across that little laminate table. Trust amendments, a transfer of the Gastonia property, a sale of my majority shares for estate simplification. Sign here, Dad. I refused every time. Every single time. I'd push it back across the table without a word, and Wesley's jaw would tighten, and Bianca's eyes would go from wet to dry in about half a second. The mask would slip just for me, just for a moment, before they put it back on for the nurses on their way out. What they couldn't understand, what drove Wesley out of his mind, was why the old man wouldn't break. He held all the cards. He'd taken everything. So why couldn't he get my signature? Because there were two things he didn't know. The first was that my majority shares were locked in a structure Diane and I set up 20 years ago that required my personal biometric verification at the bank, my actual thumbprint in person on bank premises to transfer. No conservator's signature could override it. We'd built it that way on purpose, after a friend of mine got cleaned out by a crooked partner. Wesley needed me physically, willingly, at that bank. He couldn't fake his way past it. And as long as I sat in that locked third-floor room refusing him, the thing he wanted most in the world stayed just out of his reach. The second thing he didn't know was about my daughter. Her name is Nora. I have to tell you about Nora carefully, because for 19 months I got her completely wrong, and the getting wrong is the worst thing I've ever lived through, worse than the room, worse than the locked door. Nora is 2 years younger than Wesley. She runs the regional accounts for the company. Ran them, before all this. When everything fell apart, Nora was the one I expected to fight for me. And she didn't. That was the part that nearly killed me. At the hearing, on that video screen, the conservatorship petition included a sworn statement from Nora Mercer, my own daughter, agreeing that I was no longer able to manage my affairs and should be placed in a secure environment for my safety. My girl, my Nora, who I used to carry on my shoulders at the state fair, she signed against me. When she visited, she came alone. Every other week, she'd sit across from me with this flat, cold expression I didn't recognize, and she'd say things like, "Dad, you need to cooperate. This is easier if you just let Wesley handle things." She never touched me, never cried. One time I reached for her hand across the table, and she pulled it back like I'd burned her. I stopped expecting her visits to mean anything. I figured she'd thrown in with her brother because that's where the money was. I grieved her like she was dead. Some nights I grieved her harder than I grieved Diane, because Diane at least had loved me to the end. I was wrong about all of it, but I didn't find that out until day 571. That was the morning Eli, the night nurse, slipped a folded note into my notebook on his way off shift. No name on it, just one line, in handwriting recognize, and a phone number. When the door opens, walk straight to the black car. Don't speak to anyone. Trust the man in the glasses. N. I stared at that letter N for a long time. My heart was doing things I didn't trust. 3 days later, the door opened. It was a Thursday in early October. A lawyer I'd never met. A younger man, sharp suit, rimless glasses, the kind of calm that comes from never having lost, walked into the family lounge of Cedar Hollow with a court order in his hand and a private nurse beside him to document my condition. His name was Marcus Bishop. He'd argued in front of the state Supreme Court twice before he turned 35. And he'd taken my case, he told me, because a friend asked me to, and because I've wanted to burn down a fraudulent conservatorship for about 10 years. I asked him who the friend was. He just smiled and said, "Let's get you out of here first, Mr. Mercer." They wheeled the legal machinery in fast, an emergency petition for an independent neuropsychological evaluation, performed that same afternoon by a court-appointed specialist with no connection to Wesley or Voss. 3 hours of testing. I have never in my life been so happy to be asked to draw a clock. The results came back the next morning. No dementia, no cognitive impairment of any kind. A 70-year-old man with the executive function of a corporate executive, which is what I'd been my whole life. The specialist report used a phrase I've had framed since. There is no medical basis for this individual's confinement, and the original evaluation appears, on its face, irregular. Irregular. That's lawyer for somebody got paid. When the automatic doors of Cedar Hollow slid open and I stepped out into the parking lot, the October sun hit me so hard I had to stop and put a hand on the wall. 19 months of fluorescent light will do that. The air smelled like cut grass and somebody's diesel truck, and freedom, and I just stood there breathing it like a man who'd been underwater. There was a black Cadillac sedan idling at the curb. The man in the glasses opened the back door, and I want you to understand, I had no idea in that moment where I was going or who had saved me. I only knew the letter said N, and I let myself hope, just a little, that the daughter I'd buried in my heart might still be alive somewhere. We drove to a hotel downtown. The Ballantine and Marcus Bishop laid the whole thing out on a sweet table while I took the first hot shower I'd taken alone, unsupervised, in 19 months. I scrubbed until my skin was raw. I'm not ashamed to tell you I cried in there. Not sad tears. The other kind. The kind that comes from somewhere way down low when a thing you thought was over turns out not to be over. When I came out in a robe, there was a second person in the room. An older woman, maybe my age, silver hair cropped short, a navy pantsuit, and the kind of stillness lawyers and snipers share. Dolores Whitfield, 30 years a litigator before they pushed her out for being too honest. Bishop had brought her in because he said, when you're going after family, you want somebody who's already lost everything and isn't afraid of the dark. Mr. Mercer, she said, your son made several mistakes. The biggest one was greed, and the second was thinking nobody was watching him. Then she set a manila envelope on the table. No return address. Just that single letter on the flap. N. I opened it with hands that wouldn't quite hold still. Inside was a USB drive and a note on a torn piece of yellow legal pad. Everything you need is on here. I'm sorry it took so long. I had to be close enough to see what they were doing, and the only way to be close was to pretend. Trust Marcus. He's better than they are. N. Bishop plugged the drive into his laptop and turned it toward me, and my whole world tilted. Bank records. 19 months of them. Money flowing out of Mercer building and supply in slow, careful streams. A consulting company called Crestline Strategic Partners LLC that had billed the company $2.3 million for executive advisory services that didn't exist. Crestline was incorporated 4 days after my conservatorship hearing. The sole owner was Bianca Mercer. There were emails, Wesley to Dr. Voss, arranging the evaluation, a wire confirmation for $40,000 to Voss's wellness clinic. A text thread between Wesley and Bianca that I had to stop reading halfway through because it made me physically sick. The two of them joking about how much longer they'd have to keep the old man on ice before they could finally liquidate the company and be done with all of it. And there were spreadsheets, detailed ones, color-coded, the kind only one person in that company built because I taught her how. I looked up at Bishop, Who put this together? Your source has been documenting it for over a year and a half, he said. Every transaction, every email she could legally pull. She fed it to me piece by piece. She told me not to move until you were safe, because the second we acted, they'd come after her. Who is she? My voice didn't sound like mine. Bishop and Whitfield looked at each other, and Dolores Whitfield, who I don't think has smiled since the Clinton administration, smiled. I think you already know, she said. Nora, my Nora. Every cold visit, every pulled back hand, every word she spoke against me in that hearing. She'd signed that statement so they'd trust her, keep her close, leave her access to the books. She sat across that laminate table and called me incompetent so that Wesley would never once suspect the person quietly mapping every crime he committed. She let me believe she'd abandoned me, let me grieve her, let me hate her a little, because the only way to save me was to break my heart and trust I'd forgive her when it was over. I had to sit down. I'm not a young man, and that kind of thing takes the legs out from under you. Where is she now? I asked. Safe, Bishop said, and waiting for the right moment, which is the next thing we need to talk about. Mr. Mercer, how would you like to handle this? I looked out the window at Charlotte, my city, the skyline I'd helped build one load of lumber at a time, and I thought about 19 months of a locked door. Cold, I said. I want to do this cold. We moved fast because Bishop said the only advantage we had was that Wesley didn't know I was out yet. Cedar Hollow had been ordered not to notify the conservator until the court reviewed the new evaluation. And the court, it turned out, did not look kindly on a doctor who'd fit an exam for cash. First, the bank. With a clean bill of mental health and my own thumbprint, I walked into First Carolina Bank on a Friday morning and reactivated every control on every account. I revoked the conservatorship powers, which the court suspended that same afternoon, pending the fraud review. I froze the corporate accounts under an emergency forensic audit. By 5 o'clock, Wesley Mercer, the conservator, the CEO, the man who controlled all of it, couldn't move a dollar. He found out at dinner. I know exactly how he found out, because Dolores Whitfield, who has a gift for theater, made sure of it. Wesley and Bianca were at the Capitol Grill on a Friday night, hosting 2 investors. The Kesslers, a couple who ran a private equity fund, and were apparently about to sink $15 million into Wesley's plan to modernize and expand the Mercer brand, which is corporate language for sell off everything my father built. Wesley was at the center table, the one you reserve when you want the whole room to see you. He ordered the dry-aged ribeye. He ordered a $400 bottle of Camus. He was, by all accounts, on top of the world. The check came. Wesley handed over the company card with the kind of careless flick a man uses when he's never once worried about money. Declined. He laughed. Told the server to run it again. Declined. Told Bianca to use hers. Same account. Declined. And while my son sat there at that center table with his face going from confused to red to white, the bar TV mounted over his shoulder cut to the local evening news. Because by then Bishop had given a statement and the courthouse filing was public record, and Charlotte loves nothing more than watching a rich man fall. Founder of Mercer Building and Supply released from facility after independent evaluation finds no cognitive impairment. Family conservatorship under fraud investigation. My photograph on the screen. Then a clip of me on the courthouse steps in a gray suit, looking healthy and steady and absolutely nothing like the broken old man Wesley had described to the Kesslers 10 minutes earlier. Mr. and Mrs. Kessler made their excuses and left. The server hovered with an unpaid $800 check, and Wesley's phone, I'm told, buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. Enjoy the last good meal. N. It wasn't a declined card. It was the first domino. By morning, it was everywhere. Not just the news, the internet got hold of it the way it does. Someone leaked the Crestline filings. Someone else found Dr. Voss's name on 3 other conservatorship cases that suddenly looked very interesting. Within 48 hours, the hashtag number free Calvin Mercer was trending across the Carolinas, and a national elder rights organization had picked up my case as an example of conservatorship abuse. I had spent 19 months as a man nobody would listen to. Now the whole country was listening. The next part I did in person, and I'm not proud of how much I enjoyed it. The house on Providence Road. My house, the one Diane picked the wallpaper for. I arrived on a Wednesday afternoon with a court officer, 2 sheriff's deputies, and Marcus Bishop, who carried the eviction order and the restored property deed. Wesley came to the front door in sweatpants and 3 days of beard. He hadn't slept. "Good. Dad," he started. "Don't," I said. "You lost the right to call me that the day you signed me into that place." The officer read the order. Premarital and pre-conservatorship asset, sole ownership, Calvin Mercer. Immediate possession. Wesley and Bianca had 2 hours to remove personal belongings. Clothes only, nothing purchased with company funds, which it turned out was most of it. Bianca came flying out in a silk robe screaming that I couldn't do this, that the furniture was hers, the art was hers. I looked at the woman who'd routed $2.5 million to a fake company while I rotted behind a locked door, and I felt nothing but the cold I'd been saving up for 19 months. "None of it was ever yours," I told her. "You just borrowed my life for a while. Time to give it back." And then a car pulled into the drive, a silver Audi, and Nora got out. Wesley's whole body changed. Hope flooded into his face like blood into a bruise. "Nora," he said, "thank God. Talk to him. Tell him this is insane. We're family." Nora walked past her brother like he was a lawn ornament. She walked straight to me. And for the first time in 19 months, my daughter looked at me with her real face. Diane's face, the warm one, the one I thought I'd lost. And her eyes were wet, and she said one word, "Dad." I've replayed that moment more times than any other in my life. I pulled her into my arms right there on the front lawn with the deputies and the lawyers and the neighbors filming on their phones, and I held my girl while 19 months came apart in my chest. Behind us, Wesley finally understood. "It was you," he said. His voice cracked. "The audit, the bank, the leak. You did this. You were. The whole time you were." Nora turned to him, still inside my arms. "I sat in that room and called our father incompetent so you'd trust me," she said. "I let him think I'd left him. Do you know what that costs, Wesley? Do you have any idea?" Her voice didn't shake. "I documented every dollar you stole, every lie. I have all of it. I've had it for over a year. You're my sister." "I was your sister," she said. "You sent our father to a locked ward to take his money. That person, the one I grew up with, he's gone. I don't know who you are." The boardroom came 2 weeks later on the 40th floor of the Mercer Tower, and it was the only place I let myself feel something close to satisfaction, because that room was where I'd worked 20-hour days for 40 years, 8 directors around the marble table, me at the head, Bishop at my shoulder with the forensic audit on a screen. The numbers were a horror show, profits down, debt up, money bled out through crestline like a slit artery. When I put up the slide showing Bianca's name as sole owner of the consulting firm that had billed the company millions, you could hear the room stop breathing. The doors banged open and Wesley shoved his way in, security a step too slow. Wrinkled shirt, wild eyes. "I'm still the CEO," he said. "This is illegal." "You were appointed CEO under a conservatorship," Bishop said calmly. "That a court has now ruled was obtained through fraud. As of this morning, you're not anything." I stood up. As holder of my restored majority shares, I said, "I move to remove Wesley Mercer for cause and refer the matter for criminal prosecution. I have the votes alone." I let that sit a second, but I'd like it to be unanimous. I looked at the door. "Marcus, bring in our last director." Nora walked in. Charcoal suit, hair pulled back, a leather folder under her arm. She took the empty seat at the table. Her seat, the 30% of shares her mother had left her in a trust Wesley never even knew existed, structured by Diane so that our daughter would have a vote if anything ever went wrong. Diane. watching out for me from 4 years in the grave. I had to look down at the table for a second. Wesley stared at his sister. Mom's shares were dissolved. You never read the trust documents, Nora said. You never read anything that didn't have a dollar sign on it. That was always your problem. She opened her folder. I vote to remove Wesley Mercer and to pursue full criminal prosecution for fraud, for embezzlement, for conspiracy, for what you did to our father. 8 hands went up. Unanimous. Security, I said. Wesley turned to her one last time, and his face wasn't angry anymore. It was just lost. Nora, please. She turned her chair toward the window and looked out at the city. She didn't answer him. But I saw her shoulders, and I knew my girl was crying even if she'd die before she let him see it. The trial took 4 months. I sat in the front row every single day, with Nora's hand on mine. Dr. Helena Voss took a plea and surrendered her license. She testified against Wesley to save herself. Bianca's lawyer tried to paint her as a misled wife, but $2.3 million in a company with your name on it is hard to explain away. Wesley got 11 years for conspiracy, fraud, and the unlawful confinement of a vulnerable adult. Bianca got 9. When they read the sentence, Wesley turned around and found my eyes in the gallery, and I held his gaze, and I gave him nothing. Not hate, not forgiveness, just the same flat, cold look he'd given me across that laminate table at Cedar Hollow, month after month, while I rotted. On the courthouse steps afterward, under a sky so blue it almost hurt, Nora finally broke. 19 months of pretending came out of her all at once, and I held my daughter on those steps the same way I'd held her at the state fair when she was 6 and got lost in the crowd. I'm so sorry, Daddy, she kept saying. I had to. I didn't know any other way. You saved my life, I told her. You gave up everything, let your whole family think you'd betrayed your own father, to save me. There's nothing to be sorry for. There's nothing in this world to be sorry for. I signed the company over to her 6 months later. All of it. Nora Mercer, founder's daughter, chief executive officer, 100%. She'd earned it in a way I never had. I built it with my hands, but she saved it with her heart, and that's the harder thing. I drove out to see Wesley once. Just once. The state penitentiary out past Albemarle. He looked smaller. He told me he was sorry, and I believed that part was even true. But sorry is a thing you say after you get caught, and it doesn't unlock a door. You'll do your time, I told him through the glass. And when you walk out, you'll have what you tried to give me. No company, no name, no father. You took 19 months from a man who loved you more than his own life. So I'm taking what's left of mine and spending it with the child who actually loved me back. He said Dad one more time as I stood up. I didn't turn around. I'd already turned around once in my life at that word, in my own kitchen, and look where it got me. I'm out at the lake now. Got the place on Lake Norman I always promised myself. Nora comes out on Sundays and we sit on the dock and she tells me about the company and I pretend not to understand the new software so she'll keep explaining it because I just like hearing her talk. I learned something in that locked room that I'm too old and too stubborn to keep to myself, so I'll leave you with it. Family isn't the people who share your blood. Blood put me behind that door. Family is the one who stays, even when staying costs her everything, even when it means letting you believe she's gone. My son had my name and my fortune and my trust, and he threw all 3 away. My daughter pretended to throw me away to save me, and that pretending nearly killed her, and she did it anyway. So if there's somebody in your life quietly carrying a weight for you, somebody whose love looks cold from the outside because they're protecting you from something you can't see yet, don't do what I did. Don't grieve them while they're still fighting for you. I almost lost the one person who'd never let me go. Don't make my mistake. Hold on to the ones who stay. 19 months behind a door with a 4-digit code taught me something I'd spent 70 years too busy to learn. Every locked door in my life was built by a choice somebody made, and most of those choices were small before they were monstrous. Wesley didn't wake up one morning a thief. He let a little resentment in. then a little greed. Then he let Bianca convince him that what I built belonged to him by right and not by labor. And by the time he signed me into Cedar Hollow, he'd already crossed 100 smaller lines. Nobody saw. That's how a man loses himself. Not in one leap. In a slow walk he keeps telling himself he can turn around from. I think about cause and effect a lot now. Out here on the dock, Wesley chose the easy lie over the hard truth, and the lie ate him. Bianca chose money over the man who trusted her, and the money put her in a cell. Those weren't accidents, they were harvests. You plant deception, you reap a courtroom. There's no mystery to it once you stop pretending there is. But the part that saved me wasn't luck either. Nora did 3 things, and I want you to hear them, because they're the only inheritance worth leaving anybody. First, she refused to let a wrong stand, even when standing against it cost her everything she loved. That's a backbone, and most people never grow one because it hurts too much to use. Second, she was smart about it. She didn't scream the truth from a rooftop where they could bury her. She got close, stayed quiet, kept records, learned the law, and built a case so clean no judge could wave it away. Anger without a plan is just noise. She had the brains to make hers land. And third, she endured 19 months of letting her own father believe she'd abandoned him. Can you imagine carrying that and not setting it down? That kind of staying power isn't something you're born with. You build it one hard day at a time. So if you take anything from an old man who lost almost everything, take this. Be the kind of person who can't be bought, because the people who can be bought always end up sold. Sharpen your mind, because a good heart with no judgment gets trampled by people like Bianca. And when life puts you behind a locked door you didn't deserve, don't break and don't go numb. Outlast it. The door that opens on your worst day can become the same door your betrayers walk out of with nothing. I lost a son I loved. I won't pretend that doesn't ache. But I found out who actually loved me, and at my age that's worth more than $60 million. Choose your people by who stays when staying costs them. The rest is just furniture.